Greetings, everyone. I hope you can hear me. I'm Martha Zavala, president of the League of Women Voters, Pasadena-area, and I'm delighted to welcome you to League at Night, putting the action in local climate action plans. We have a wonderful showing this evening. I see that we have more than 70 participants at this time, with more arriving as I speak. Some of us are joining from way out of state, so it's very exciting for us. Thank you. Share if you can share the list of individuals that we have. We want to thank them all for coming here. Our topic tonight is Pasadena's Climate Action Plan, or CAP, a plan that was adopted by the city in 2018. This plan affects all Pasadena area residents and will affect so many of us for years to come. Climate change is of primary importance to the League of Women Voters at the national, state, and local level. And as you may know, the League is a nonpartisan national organization whose mission it is to empower voters and to defend democracy. The League is over 101 years old and has more than 500,000 members now, and many branches, about 700 branches in all 50 states. This is Women's History Month, and we need to continue the League's tradition of advocating for causes that have the power to transform lives. Our decision to devote Pasadena League at Night, this event, to this topic and the actions that cities can take to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions is a reflection of our commitment to inform and engage on this critically important subject. Our speakers tonight will be Pasadena's Director of Planning, David Reyes, and Dean Kubani, a sustainability expert from Santa Monica. We are truly privileged to have such knowledgeable and expert speakers. Now for just a few program details so you know what's coming up. The speaker presentations will the speakers will take about 15 to 20 minutes each. And then after the presentations, we'll have a Q&A. You'll have your opportunity to enter your questions into the Q&A feature at the bottom of your Zoom screen, and ask them both questions. So we want it to really be a lively discussion. So please contribute to our evening by asking questions. We have, as I mentioned before, several public government officials in attendance and to show their commitment to this. And I would like to make sure we acknowledge them at this minute. And let me share my screen and hope you can see it. Here they are. We're really excited about the interest of the level of interest that we have right to us, and important to us having a I don't know if you can still hear me, but it's telling me my okay, I zoomed out apparently.
I hear you now, Martha.
Thank you. So apparently I was zoomed out. Right in there. So as you can see, we have some local individuals, Vice Mayor Andy Wilson from Pasadena, Mayor Sasha Renee Perez from Alhambra, Doug Cauliflower from the Altadena Town Council, Eric Ike, Councilman La Cañada Flintridge, Dylan Feek, City Manager Monrovia, Savannah Moore, Field Director, Superintendent Barger's Supervisor Barger's office, Eric Benton, City Council from Albuquerque. Yay, New Mexico's in the house. Tyann Evans, President of the Delta Sigma Theta Pasadena Chapter. Charmaine Mills Ely, President, Pasadena Altadena Chapter of the Lynx. David Pettit, Senior Attorney, Natural Resources Defense Council. Juanita West Tillman, Executive Secretary, NAACP Pasadena Chapter. She also happens to be one of our members. And Billy Malone, Chair of the Altadena Council. So we're very excited about them being with us at this time. What I would like to encourage you to do again is that to just let you know that this program is being recorded by Pasadena Media. It's live broadcasting right now on Public Access TV, and we're going to have the video posted on our league's YouTube page by tomorrow, sometime tomorrow. So we encouraged you to let all of your friends know that it's going to be available if they missed it. And I know you're all here to really listen to our two speakers. So I want to turn this over now to Cynthia, our moderator, Cynthia Kennedy, who will introduce our speakers and moderate the Q&A session this evening. Cynthia, if you would please get our program started. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Martha. I hope everyone can hear. Okay, I think you can probably hear me now. It's a pleasure to be the moderator of this program this evening. As our president, Martha Zavala, has stated, our topic is Pasadena's Climate Action Plan. It's a thick document. It's not bedtime reading. It's very thick. It's full of photos, text, and graphs. It was prepared in 2018 by a consulting firm and was adopted by the Pasadena City Council. Its stated purpose, and you're going to hear more about this, is to set forth big picture strategies, kind of mid-level measures, and then very specific actions that our city can implement to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions. So that is why we, the Natural Resources Committee of the League of Women Voters, Pasadena Chapter, Pasadena-area, that's why we started studying this Pasadena CAP late last year. It was actually the fall of last year. We wanted to see what our city is doing, what kind of commitments our city is making to really address the global climate emergency that we are facing. And as our president Zavala has said, this is our top priority as a national, state, and local organization to address climate change. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce our first speaker, David Reyes, who is the Director of Planning for the City of Pasadena. And he's going to talk about our Climate Action Plan and give you some insights into the specific actions that the city is going to take either through the Climate Action Plan or perhaps outside the context of the Climate Action Plan to reduce the greenhouse gas emissions that our city produces. And then after David speaks, I'll introduce you to our next speaker, who will then speak, and then we'll have Q&A. David Reyes, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much, Cynthia. And I'd like to say thank you to President Zavala and the entire league. What an honor to be here. And I was doing very well till I saw the list of all the dignitaries. So I got to make sure that I don't make any mistakes. But it truly is an honor. And I think that after tonight, I'm hopeful that you'll have a better understanding of Pasadena's commitment to the environment. And I think you'll also find that there's always room for improvement. The document was done in 2018, and a lot has changed since then. And I think that there is opportunity for improvements to what we can do as a city. So let me share my screen and take you through, and I'll be brief with this. I won't, make this a little smaller here. make sure that we can see this. So as stated, the purpose of the cap was really to look at long-term reduction of GHG. And I think that when we took it upon ourselves to do this, we were looking at the state-directed emission goals. And so, in other words, this document was really done to reduce gases consistent with state requirements and mandates. And when we get into what the cap is and what their opportunities are, I think there are opportunities beyond those state mandates. So to evaluate the cap's effectiveness, the city council, when adopting it, they said, look, you've got to do annual monitoring. And so it was adopted in 2018. So at the end of 2018, when 2019 started, we began the update for 2018 to see how we did. And we took the 2018 annual monitoring update to the city council. We also took it to the EAC, which I'll get into in just a moment, and then to the city's MSC, which is the Municipal Services Committee. And it's really important that we do this because I think that this needs to be a living, breathing document, not a document that is prepared and sits on the shelf. So the annual review is extremely important. The other thing that we were asked to do, directed to do by the city council, is to conduct an inventory so we know where we're at. Let's take a GHG inventory. We're releasing an RFP for that, where we are a year behind. COVID was not helpful for a lot of activities that the city was trying to do, but this is an important baseline strategy. We expect to start this work in this summer so that we can share with everyone, the community, the council, how our cap has actually done in reducing the GHG inventory levels. And I think by having a 2020 baseline, actually it'll probably be a 2021 by the time we're done. But it's important to know what we're doing, how we're doing, and what we can do better. And then the other thing that the city council asked us to do with respect to the cap was to really include the Environmental Advisory Commission in sort of a collaborative role. And so there's back and forth with the EAC. We do present to the EAC before we go to anyone else, and we get input from them. And I think the cap has benefited from that. I know that staff has. But what you're going to find, I think, from a city's perspective, is that while I am the director of the planning department and we have a lot of functions within the department, there are many functions that, with respect to greenhouse gas emissions, that are really outside of my department. And so as a city, we need to work together. So from a background perspective, I've talked about what the goals were. There is a 2035 horizon year, meaning that we have strategies for reduction to 2035, and beyond that, it gets a little hazy, and I don't think it makes a lot of sense to try to predict what's going to happen. There's going to be a lot of changes in technology, I think, in the very near future that will probably even require some changes to this document. So we have our GHG reduction targets and our goals. And I'm going to go through this, and again, happy to take questions later on. But really, when we were looking at our reduction goals, we wanted to find out what was causing the most emissions. And as you can imagine, it was from transportation and energy. Yeah, there was a little bit in water and waste, but the vast majority of our GHG emissions was coming from energy and transportation. And so, if I can, oops, sorry here. There we go. So doing nothing, the blue represents sort of business as usual reductions. And those are basically the reason it's actually going down is because there are state requirements across the state that are going to result, or at least are planned to result in reductions. But at the city level, There are other things that are happening and that we've adopted. So what you see here are the orange sort of markers, if you will. These are state goals set forth in either state law or executive orders. And what we wanted to do was change our behavior such that we could meet the goals. And if you can see, I hope that you can see my arrow as well. This was the state goal for 2020, and this was our Pasadena goal. So below that, and then here's the state goal. We get aligned with SB 32 in 2030. And then beyond that, it starts to get a little hazy when you get out this far. But so the goal of this document was to identify ways of reducing emissions and ensure that we were compliant with any state laws. And there you see the reduction strategy, the sort of reduced GHG emissions that we hope to realize. And in terms of the strategy, there are within the document, as stated by Cynthia, it is thick. There are strategies, there are measures, there are actions, and they come from sustainable mobility and land use. Within the energy efficiency and conservation area, there's waste reduction, water conservation, and urban greening. And some of the measures are quantifiable and we can actually measure them, and some are more supportive. And I think that at least a challenge that I've had with the document and criticism that we've heard is that the supportive statements, the sort of encourage and try to, while I think they're really good goals, they don't require anybody to do anything, and therefore there's no guarantee that it will help. But nonetheless, they were identified and they're within the document. But in terms of sort of measuring, so the 2020 reduction strategy was really focused on the energy sector and then the transportation sector to get to the 2020 goal. And we'll know, I know that it's 2021 and we're starting the analysis now of how we did in 2020. It's only, it's now into spring almost. We think that we've done pretty well, but we'll know in a couple of months, and we're working on sharing that. So what we have from an implementation standpoint for the CAP is at the project level, every project has to go through a consistency checklist and either do an inventory themselves or choose menu items off the checklist that are above and beyond our existing zoning code. And that's typically what developers do, is they'll go off of the list. And at the citywide level, what our department does is sort of track how other departments are doing with respect to their goals. We don't force them to do anything, but we track how they're doing and then we report out. And again, that's with the monitoring, and that's what this document, this update was done for. And there's also the every 5 years, the baseline, looking at the baseline emissions and then analyzing how we're doing every 5 years by studying actual emissions. So in terms of the 2019 annual update, which was presented to EAC several months ago, and this is going to be taken to the Municipal Services Committee on March 23rd, and then to City Council on April 12th. There's a report card that we did, and we basically looked at the status of 13 performance indicators, the ones that were actually quantifiable. And what we found is that 2 were achieved, 7 are likely to be achieved, and 4 are in this area where we need to do better because we don't know, frankly, how we're doing. There's missing data, or some policies may have changed and we need to come up with other policies. And that's an ongoing conversation. And it's good that we're tracking this so we know where we need to focus our energies and attention as a city. With respect to what we've achieved, the goal for 2020 reduction this was listed as E4 within the document. It's residential and commercial carbon neutral energy. The goal was a reduction to replace 950,000 kilowatt hours of electricity. And what's been done was over 65 million. So there was a massive increase there. With respect to potable water, 0% reduction in water consumption per capita, and we were 33% below the water consumption requirements. And then with respect to what we are likely think that we'll have achieved after we finish the analysis is with respect to areas in transportation demand management, alternative fuel vehicles, energy retrofits of existing buildings, municipal operations, the city's energy portfolio, green space and urban forest. All of these are not within the planning department per se, but there's going to be a lot more expose at the March 23rd meeting when we have everyone there from Public Works and Water and Power. And with respect to undetermined, there are some transit discussion policy items that we're looking at that we know we probably need to change. With respect to, we tried to do a project where we were putting bikes in various areas of the city in the hopes that people would use them, and it turned out they didn't. And so what we're looking at is alternative options for that first mile, last mile conundrum that does exist. And but the bike sharing vendor concept didn't work in our city. I know it's worked in other cities. So we're evaluating that, and I know the Department of Transportation is actively looking at different options and how to do better. Transit mode and the rider share is down for 2019. And then for 2020, obviously with COVID, this is going to be an interesting year for us to study. And I think all the more reason that our GHG analysis should probably look at the 2021 year. 2020 may have been an oddity, if you will, with respect to some emissions. So with respect to solid waste, there were changes with respect to the recycling market at the global level. And so they're probably not going to meet their 75% diversion rate. And so they're actively looking at, Public Works is actively looking at alternative ways to meet that requirement and or change that requirement. And there's some highlights with respect to some of the near-term actions that we've done within the document. And there's a couple of items that we're going to get into in more detail about where I think there's a lot of bang for the buck with respect to changing our building code. So there's some ideas within the document about the first one is a major initiative by the Water and Power Department with respect to what's called the Power Integrated Resource Plan. Those of you that are following this probably are aware of where we're going and what we're doing. And really the goal there is to try to get to 100% carbon neutral portfolio. So that remains a major effort by the city. As a city that produces energy, there are challenges beyond just saying we're going to do it. There are fiscal implications and existing contracts that are in place. But again, a lot of this is within the water and power discussion that will be had at MSC. The bottom bullet point is really interesting because I talked about things changing. In 2018, we were told at the state level that Title 24 energy requirements for new buildings were basically going to get to a point by 2020 that all new residential projects would be zero net energy, and that has not happened. And so what that means is at the city level, we need to take some different steps, and I'll talk more about that in the coming slides. I think I skipped one. So one of the things that Cynthia asked me to do was within my department, hey, how are you guys doing? What have you guys done as a department? Where are you and what have you done? And if you've not done anything, when are you going to do it? And I'm going to lump a lot of these into what's called the 3-year building code adoption cycle. And that will be adopted by the city council in October or November of 2022, which means this next year we need to start planning for major changes to the city's building code. And it says here under T41D, update the zoning code. Really, it's going to be within the building code because this is where we're going to get the bang for the buck in terms of new construction and the requirements that I'm going to talk about in just a moment. So with respect to efficient land use, what was identified was the city's general plan does call for mixed use developments and placing most of the city's density in terms of new construction within a TOD, within a transit oriented development area, within a half mile of one of our 6 major transit stops. We are blessed in Pasadena with 6 Gold Line stops, which really is the highest in all of Los Angeles County outside the city of Los Angeles. So it's really a big deal. And so what we're doing is we're actively updating our specific plans, which have our zoning regulations in them now, to address that and to codify those rules and requirements. And that's an ongoing effort that's happening now and will be happening through the spring and summer with the city's planning commission. There's a couple of other ones that are long-term that were listed in the CAP for some reason as long-term goals. One of them was limit equipment idling, and the way that it's listed is, try to develop a plan and strategy to ensure that construction vehicles aren't idling. Well, there's a couple of ways to do that. And I think that probably the goal is going to be to update requirements for building plan check. We've talked about it. We've not done anything yet. My sense is that this is, it was listed as like a long-term plan. So it was actually outside, beyond even 2025. But we're certainly probably going to take a look at that before then. And then there's this idea with respect to alternative energy and fuel requirements, long-term implementation actions considered supportive. So for vehicle emissions, I think that if I get to the next slide, I think that we can really get into some of this discussion. And it starts here with the green building ordinance. So there's quite a bit of things that can be done by cities with respect to new construction that can really help. And one of the things that our specific plans are going to do is they're going to prohibit the construction of any new vehicle fueling stations. And I think that's just going to be a prohibition that we put out there. We hope that it'll be helpful. We hope that it'll be sending a message. But beyond that, there's really an opportunity with respect to new construction as it relates to gas appliances. And so what we're going to be looking at and developing a plan to present to the city council is how can we require and when should we require all new residential multifamily units to have Oling electric appliances. I think this is something that would be a great benefit. We're looking at numbers. Again, this was in 2018, it wasn't really thought of this way, but I think it's really important that we start thinking about it in this way as we start to update our green building code, because I think we can also learn from other cities in terms of what they've done and how they've done it. But there's also other opportunities besides just the appliances that are important. With respect to solar design and natural light, the building shade and cool roofs, I'll say that we have just finished a Compass Blueprint project with SCAG. We applied for and received, it was really a grant to do what's called Cooling Pasadena project. And we're really excited about that. I think we just completed a second round of workshops 2 weeks ago. And I think that the league is going to share with anybody that's interested. We have a link. We have a website dedicated to that project. It's really interesting. It talks about things that I think most of us that are interested in the environment really know about, but we don't always see it come to fruition with respect to city planning. So obviously understanding the planting of trees, how cool roofs can help, and then ensuring the right amount of light and air between buildings so that you get natural light, natural ventilation within new construction. And those are all things that we're looking at as part of the updated specific plan. So we're on track there because we're working on that now. Make sure I'm not going backwards. And again, these are some other, lots of things about solar. And so what I'll say as a city that we've done is we've streamlined, and I know it may sound funny to some of you on the call, but for us, sometimes cities get extremely bureaucratic in terms of their processes. And I think that planning, especially in Pasadena, well, Dean will talk about Santa Monica as well. But I think that what we've done is we've really streamlined the process. It's an over-the-counter permit. I was talking with my staff, and on Friday, I think they issued 6 solar permits. 5 of them were for single family, which I know is not a lot of bang for your buck as a whole city, but the more of those that we can do and the easier that we can make it for homeowners, I think that I think that we're going to start to see some real benefits. But we did issue one for a commercial project, which was really, I think, important. So that's what we've been focusing on, is how can we streamline that process? How can we integrate the review of the process at the planning counter and ensure that building and fire and anybody else that needs to look at it can sign off easily, and the applicant can come in, get their permit, and then leave the building. And what we're looking to do within the very next few months is to have it all online, so that applications for solar roofs would be an online submittal and an online permit. We're really excited about that. So with respect to next steps, again, this was sort of an update to the CAP. You've seen a preview today. We've not talked about the all electric appliances with council just yet. So you've heard it first here tonight. We've been thinking about it and talking about it internally. But we're going to go to the Municipal Services Committee on March 23rd. It'll be on the city's website under committees. I don't have a link yet because there's no agenda just yet, but that'll be on the 23rd. And then on April 12th, we'll present to the City Council. And both of those will be opportunities for the public to comment, to weigh in, and to let the decision makers know what the community's thoughts are on our CAP, on the update, and how we might make it better. And then looking ahead, we're developing an RFP to pursue the contract for the GHG inventory that we want to start in the summer. And I believe that does complete my presentation. And I just need to stop sharing screen. You know, if there's some tech person on,
David, can you hear my voice? This is Cynthia.
Yeah.
Okay, Catherine, can you host? Our hostess with the mostest. There you go. Okay. Hello, everyone. I hope you can see me now. No, you're still seeing David, I think.
I know. I'm sorry. I apologize to everyone. I'm struggling here.
Well, while we're waiting, I can just say I'm delighted to have gotten the advance news. We got the advance news here that you're presenting the electric. We'll be an electric only city. That's wonderful.
Well,
like Pasadena,
it'll
huh?
be nice. I apologize if there is somebody. I may have to log out and then jump back in so that you can take over the screen. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm actually going to log out of the meeting and I'll rejoin.
Thank you so much, David. That was great.
Thank you very much.
Everyone bear with us.
Cynthia, yes, you may have to start speaking while David figures out how to get screen sharing out of here.
Thank you so much.
Sorry about that, everybody.
Yeah, we'll get it together. It's absolutely a miracle that we managed to do these Zoom programs at all. But here we are doing it. So that was great. I'll introduce our next speaker. I was trying to find someone else. We were trying to find someone else who had great expertise, someone from outside of our city. And I was delighted to be introduced to Dean Kubani. Dean Kubani is a sustainability expert. He is currently the chair of the City of Santa Monica's Sustainability, I think it's Sustainability Commission?
It's the Task Force on the Environment.
Okay, I'm sorry. But you were formerly the Chief Sustainability Officer for the City of Santa Monica. And you have a great deal of expertise and a long history of working in this area. So Dean kindly agreed to join us this evening. and talk to us about putting the action in climate action plans. Thank you so much, Dean.
Sure. Thank you, Cynthia. And it's great to be here and be talking to you about this very, very important topic. And I was really excited to hear that the League of Women Voters has made it their #1 priority. They definitely recognize the urgency of addressing climate change. And what Cynthia asked me to talk about was a little bit about my experience in putting together climate action plans and the work that I've done at the local level. And just to give you a real quick background, and I'm going to take 1 second to turn on a timer to make sure that I don't go over. I have worked in city government for 25 years. I started with the city of Santa Monica in 1994, wrote the Santa Monica's first climate action plan in 1995. And I retired last year as the chief sustainability officer in Santa Monica. I'm currently teaching sustainability and regenerative studies at Cal Poly Pomona. And I'm doing a bit of consulting on climate and sustainability work. So just wanted to give you a little bit more of my background. I'm going to share my screen now and take you through my presentation. And here we go. And hopefully everybody can see that. So what I wanted to talk about to introduce this is just the urgency of the problem. And I think most people who are attending this presentation realize that climate change is a very urgent problem. A couple of slides that I talk to my students about are that we know that the Earth has been warming since the pre-industrial times. We've gone up about 1.7 degrees Fahrenheit and just under 1 degree Celsius since 1880. Every year we're finding that we're breaking new temperature records. I actually made this slide for my fall course last year. And at that time, the 6 warmest years since 1880 were 2014, 15, 16, 17, 18, and 19. Now 2020 is in that group as well. Last year we broke all kinds of monthly records for the planet, and 2020 is also one of the 10 hottest years ever on record. We saw a lot of that here in California, in LA. This was September 6th last year. Woodland Hills hit 121 degrees. We're having more record heat days throughout the planet, actually. And locally, we're seeing fires, power supply blackouts, things like that related to climate change. So it's been getting very serious. We've also been hearing about more frequent and more powerful storms because we're pumping so much energy into this system. We're getting bigger hurricanes, more of them, damaging storms. Also, jet stream changes that have more bringing freezing temperatures to places that don't normally freeze, like Houston, Texas this spring. So pumping all this extra heat into the climate or into the atmosphere is really changing the climate. And we know about melting ice caps. One thing that we're seeing, and this is from an article that was in September of last year, scientists are now seeing that the rate of melting and the rate of change in the climate is overtaking the models that they've been using. So basically, the climate is changing faster than scientists have expected. It's speeding up, and it's making this problem more urgent. So what can we expect in the future? I clipped a couple of headlines from papers last fall. Fires are unprecedented, and that's just a mere preview of what climate change has in store. Hurricane Laura from last summer and the California fires are part of the same crisis. We're seeing now almost weekly news stories about climate change and the major impacts that they are having around the world. Here was another article from our local paper in Santa Monica. Experts see worse in the future. So this is becoming a big issue. It's getting on people's radar screens, thankfully, but we don't have a whole lot of time. Is there any way to slow this train down? The IPCC is a group that has been working since the 80s, an international group of climate experts from around the world that have been evaluating greenhouse gas emissions worldwide, producing reports, and they're pretty level reports. They're not extremist. They're not blowing whistles and saying, "Oh my God, the roof's on fire." They are very, scientifically looking at what the issue is and presenting the data. But they came out with a report in 2018 that was, for this group, pretty much a call to arms. They're saying if we don't cut our emissions globally by 45% by 2030, we're not going to be able to keep temperature rise below 1.5 degrees centigrade. We're going to have so much CO2 and other greenhouse gases in the atmosphere that we're going to get significant warming. And currently we're on track for a 3 to 4 degree temperature rise, which may not sound significant, but it is will significantly impact every aspect of everyone's lives living on the planet. They're saying it's not impossible to make the changes we need to make this quickly, but it will require unprecedented transitions in all aspects of society. The problem is, as you can see, this was from 2016, the current global emissions were at this level. Here's where we're headed based on current trends globally, which is in the wrong direction. And in order to reduce emissions enough to keep our global temperatures from warming too much that it really throws things out of balance, we're going to have to cut our emissions in half in the next 9 years now. And ultimately, we need to reach a net zero emissions globally by mid-century. And so this is really an existential threat to humanity. So I wanted to put in a couple slides about city governments. Basically, the only the major groups that are really addressing climate change effectively have been city governments. They are the ones that have the funding. They are on the ground making day-to-day rules. They run infrastructure for the majority of the population in the planet. And they are able to make changes quickly, much more quickly than state governments and federal governments, who often make grand policy decisions, but that doesn't often turn into action on the ground. A couple of examples of city government initiatives. One is called ICLEI. It's called Local Governments for Sustainability. ICLEI stands for International Council for Local Environmental Initiatives, which is what their original name was when they were formed in 1990. Santa Monica joined this group in 93 and was part of the first climate action planning group. That's actually how I learned how to do inventories and develop a climate action plan. They have hundreds of cities around the world, and they are a big force, ICLEI is, in helping cities develop climate action plans that are effective and actually meet goals. There's another group that I helped to start about 12 years ago called the Urban Sustainability Directors Network. There's now over 200 cities in North America that are working. This network is great because it allows cities to share information so that we're learning from each other and building very quickly on what we're doing rather than working in isolation. And there's another group that you may have heard of called C40 cities, the Climate 40, the 40 largest cities in the world that are taking aggressive action to address climate change. Here's a map that's showing a lot of them, and they produce a lot of information for other cities. One of their recent reports, 7 climate action plans to deliver on the Paris Agreement. So they're providing information to other cities about effective plans that have been shown to significantly reduce greenhouse gas emissions in a variety of different areas. So there's a lot of information out there to help cities develop climate plans. And I mentioned that I put together our first climate action plan in Santa Monica in 1995. We've come a long way since then. This picture on the screen is the plan that Santa Monica adopted in 2019. It's called a Climate Action and Adaptation Plan. And this was an update, which we've been constantly updating since the early 90s on reducing greenhouse gas emissions, which is a priority for City of Santa Monica. You can see our overall greenhouse gas emissions, and by 2015, we were a little more than 20% below our 1990 levels, which we're using as a baseline. Santa Monica as a city has, its economy has expanded probably more than double since 1990, and our population has expanded, but we've been able to cut our greenhouse gas emission levels significantly. This box area is the time period for the action plan that was adopted in 2019, and I'll give you some more details about that. We've got a goal of 80% reduction below 1990 levels by 2030, and a net zero goal by, our council said 2050 or sooner, but the last time we spoke to them, they said by 2040. We have found, we have found that our emissions, Santa Monica, about 2/3 are related to vehicle transportation, about 1/3 are related to building energy use, 3% landfill waste, and some aviation fuel and other pieces. And as David mentioned, the state is requiring a lot of things. So we're taking into account emission reductions from state policies between now and 2030, which are going to be pretty significant. But in our plan, we've calculated the amount of emissions reductions we need to achieve from our building sector, our waste, and our transportation sectors in order to meet an 80% reduction. And then basically we've broken that out and come up with very detailed plans for making those reductions by 2030. So we've broken it out by when we're going to do it and how much of a reduction we need to make by that time period for basically zero net carbon buildings, zero waste, and sustainable mobility is how we're talking about it. The other piece of the plan is climate adaptation. Recognizing that climate change is happening so quickly, we're going to be experiencing, and we already are experiencing, effects of climate change, so that we need to become more ready as a community. We need to be water self-sufficient so that we can withstand droughts, be prepared for coastal flooding, and other types of things to address that. I'm not going to focus on that adaptation, but more on the climate actions. That's all in the plan if you want to look at it. And basically the way the plan is laid out is for each of these areas, buildings and transportation and waste, we have a number of specific programs. We've looked into the carbon reduction potential of them, the cost, the benefits, who's going to be the lead, who will help with that, and the time frame. And I'm not going to go through all this stuff in detail. There's way too much in the plan, but I just wanted to show you how it was laid out. It's a very detailed plan that gets us from the point we were at when we wrote it to 2030 and an 80% reduction. We've developed those types of things for all of these areas. There are pages of these in the plan. Talking about building electrification, we already have codes for carbon neutral or zero net energy construction for residential, for commercial. We've gone ahead of the state plans for those. We've adopted ordinances for new building, restricting natural gas equipment. We also have a number of actions to get to zero waste for our waste plan, and we have a similar list of actions for transportation and mobility, first mile, last mile, getting people out of their cars. We've actually restructured the city government to to create a mobility division that deals with all of these issues so that we can get people off the train and where they want to go without driving a car. We have a huge program to electrify, where we've been putting in lots of EV infrastructure, basically moving to an EV structured city so that we can have all the infrastructure available as more and more people are driving electric vehicles, and also so that we can provide places for people who live in multifamily housing. They can't put in an electric vehicle charger, but requiring businesses to install them and getting outside private groups to do all this. So basically, we have a very detailed and multifaceted plan to get us to these very aggressive goals that need to be achieved if we are going to survive in the long term. And a couple of final things here I wanted to talk about. One of the first things that we did, and we actually were working on this before we adopted the plan, was Santa Monica is in Southern California, Edison territory. We saw that one of the biggest ways, the quickest ways we could achieve significant reduction in greenhouse gas emissions was changing our electricity source. We helped to start this group called Clean Power Alliance, which is a community choice energy program that allows cities to opt in and purchase 100% renewable electricity. Santa Monica did this. We got it up and running through, with a lot of help from LA County and a number of other groups. Santa Monica City Council adopted 100% green energy default tier. So basically all residential and commercial customers were put into 100% green energy tier. They could, if they wanted, drop down to a lower tier that was a little bit cheaper, or they could opt out and stay with Edison. But as you can see from these numbers, overall participation in 100% renewable energy is about 96% in Santa Monica. So this cut our greenhouse gas emissions citywide overnight by about 20%. So it was a huge move and really helped us move towards that 80% reduction goal by 2030. And then just an example, I was walking down my street about a month ago, and they just broke ground on this new affordable housing project. And it's kind of an example of how the community is pulling together to help meet these goals. This is a 73 unit affordable housing building that's happening about 3 blocks away from my house. It's being built by Community Corporation of Santa Monica. They're an affordable housing developer. They are building this to LEED Platinum standards. It's going to be a zero net energy project. There won't be any natural gas in the building. It's going to be all electric. This is actually text from a news article about it that was published a couple of weeks ago. And Community Corp and other developers are seeing the benefit of this. They're going to own this building for 75 years and have to operate it. By making it super efficient and going well beyond the standards that are the bare minimum, even though it increases the cost a little bit to build it, it's saving money for both the low-income residents and for the owner of the building, Community Corp, over the lifetime of the building. So there are a lot of benefits that are coming out from doing things a little bit differently that are also helping us to meet our goals. And we see lots of this all over Santa Monica. And so I'm going to finish up here. I think I'm probably a couple minutes over. I apologize for that. But some key points: climate change is no longer a remote problem. It is urgent and needs to urgently be addressed right now. Cities can and are aggressively addressing climate change right now. No new technologies are required. There are numerous effective models being implemented in cities locally and internationally. And Santa Monica has certainly learned over the years from lots of other cities, and we've helped other cities adopt and build on what we've done. And the thing that I've learned in the 25 years I've worked in city government is that really effective action to address climate change really requires civic and political leadership. It doesn't require more money. It just requires a desire to reach a goal and then a commitment to make it happen. And it just requires doing things a little bit differently. Everybody's in a budget crisis, but there are lots of resources that are out there. We've certainly made use of a lot of them to really try and push the envelope in Santa Monica. And those things are available to cities like Pasadena and others as well. And I think that can, I'm actually optimistic that we're going to be able to make the rapid changes that we need to do. And I'm going to stop right there because I'm over, and I'm looking forward to taking your questions. So let me stop sharing. There we go.
I'm actually pretty inspired by that, Dean. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. And should I just keep my video on? And
I think so, because we're going to have Q&A now. We've got David there and you, and so the participants can see the three of us. Please feel free. I've already got 16 good questions from this very active and informed audience. So I'm, send more in, please. I think we'll have some time. I'm not sure how much time, but I just want to say about Dean's reference to this community corporation. Isn't that exciting? They found that it was profitable to them, that it made financial sense for them to develop a LEED Platinum zero net energy building of that size. It's wonderful. Okay, let's see. Let me take the first question. Wow, it's a lot of good questions here. Okay, here's a question for David. How much of the power generation for Pasadena Water and Power relies on fossil fuels currently? How can this be reduced to zero within 5 years? Tough question, but a good one.
Well, I don't know the first answer, but I don't know the exact number. I think this was an issue that was debated heavily through the creation of the cap. And again, if you looked at the beginning of my presentation about what the purpose was, I think it really quickly turned into, well, that's a nice purpose, but how can we really be green as a city? And for a city like Santa Monica that doesn't produce its own energy, it's a different calculus than a place like Pasadena that already has existing contracts in place. So I think that the challenge is going to be making a commitment into the future. I think 5 years is a number that I've heard. I don't want to speak for our water and power department, but I think that this is something that was asked and will be asked again at MSC on the 23rd. I think that there is a stated commitment from water and power to move in this direction, but I don't want to commit to that 5 years. But I think it's something that the city council is really actively pursuing and looking at. So I think 5 years is kind of a good mark for us to figure out where we'd be in 5 years.
Okay. Dean, do you have any comment on that? This is really kind of focused more on Pasadena, but perhaps you have an insight.
Oh, well, I'm not familiar with the current mix of Pasadena Water and Power's energy mix. I know that they're pushing to shed their fossil fuel energy, and they are, as David said, they're tied into longer term contracts, so it's difficult to do that. And it was, I would say, for most cities that are in a Edison territory or PG&E territory, they're now able to join these community choice energy groups that can enter into 100% renewable contracts off the bat, and that really helps them. So yeah, Pasadena somewhat has its hands tied due to existing contracts, but it seems like it's moving in the right direction with its power sources and trying to shed the fossil fuel sources.
David, is that the Intermountain Coal contract that you're referring to? That
Not just that one, but that's certainly one of the ones that's held us up for quite some time.
uh-huh. And then we'll transition from that to renewable?
That's the goal. And I think I've heard Bawa talk about this with the city council is that we really want to move in that direction. And I was talking earlier about that you're the first to hear about the all electric appliances. Since we produce electricity, maybe that's a really good idea too. So.
Okay. I have a question from Wayne Morgan. Are there requirements for commercial buildings to have solar? That's a Pasadena question.
The answer is no. I think that's part of that 3-year building code cycle about looking at ways that we can really benefit without impacting the city's bottom line. Because I think a lot of what you're going to hear going forward is that I think that there's great technology that exists. And sometimes that's expensive. To the extent that developers are able to understand what our rules are and build that into their pro forma, and they can start thinking about that, and it's just part of the building process. So we don't currently have that as a requirement, but it's going to be one of the issues that we would be looking at, not only for buildings, but also for parking lots and in other areas. I think the commercial and multifamily is probably the greatest bang for the buck because it's just the most surfaced area, and probably for all major remodels as well, not just new.
And that's the bigger issue. Santa Monica really jumped ahead with net zero energy requirements for residential and commercial buildings, but new buildings are only a small percentage of the mix. The majority of energy use in any city is in existing buildings. So we're also targeting a lot of focus on existing buildings and requirements for retrofits because you're never going to get to emission reductions by, without retrofitting your inefficient existing buildings. And there are a lot of those in every city.
We've got a number of questions here. I'll try to consolidate them. They're all about solar, or some of the questions are about solar. So what about municipal buildings? What can be done? What is being done to get the city actually to have solar, to install solar panels?
Did you want me to start, or was that for
Sure.
Dean?
For both.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Dean, I actually worked for the city of Santa Monica in 2002, 3, 4, I think, a couple of years there. Yeah, I think that with new construction, I think it's a lot easier, as Dean was saying, to sort of require that. We're not there. I think that what we need to do is really look at our existing municipal buildings and then do sort of an analysis about the cost and what that would look like. I know that the city made a commitment to going green for a lot of existing buildings. I'm sorry, I don't have those exact numbers with me in terms of what we did. But with respect to solar, I think that there are opportunities. Not all of our city buildings are historic, and so it makes it much easier. The building that I'm in, for instance, the Hale building, has somewhat of a large flat roof area that probably would be a great opportunity. So I think those are all, and I hate to keep punting to the 2023, but the 2022 building code update, but that's where we're going to be bringing drastic changes to the city's green building ordinance. And I think that those are probably appropriately addressed there, but I think that we need to start doing the analysis now to understand what it would take to do it, and then what the benefit would be, that cost benefit analysis. I know that it's not always about money, but I think, money is important, especially during these COVID times when we are really trying to watch our spending on CIP projects.
So in Santa Monica, we adopted a net zero energy requirement for all municipal construction. So all city buildings are net zero energy. The city recently completed a living building challenge building, which is net zero energy, net zero water. It's an annex to the City Hall, behind City Hall, 50,000 square foot building, which is the greenest municipal building in the country right now. But basically, all municipal projects, as a way to show the way that this can be done, the city's made a commitment to make all of its buildings that it's building as green as possible. And we're seeing, because the city is a building owner, and again, even if there's an additional upfront cost that's 2, 3, 4%, that is a tiny amount compared to the operating cost for operating that building for 75 years. And by making them as efficient as possible, it ends up saving us money over the long term.
Okay. Here's a question about residential solar panels. Residential solar panels are a technology that is working today. What can the city of Pasadena do to educate our residents and to motivate them about the benefits of residential solar? I assume that means the economic benefits, but also the benefits to the planet.
That sounds like that was to Pasadena, but it seems like Dean is jumping in. Maybe Dean can go first, and I can listen to that and hear what Santa Monica is doing.
Right. Well, we've had a program called Solar Santa Monica for about 15 years. And basically what we've done is provide lots of educational resources, presentations, tours, information to people. And what we found was initially that the biggest problem for getting people to go solar was it was too complicated. They didn't understand, where do you get solar? How much do I need? Who are the vendors? What are all the code requirements? This, that, and the other thing. So we brought in a firm, and they're at no cost to the resident or the business. These folks are working for the city of Santa Monica. They'll go out, climb on your roof, figure out how much usable space you have, look at your energy bills, figure out how big your system needs to be, and then they have pre-screened solar vendors that they can put you in touch with, or you can go find your own. They'll review the bids that you get and give you advice on how to do this, help you with the permitting, and also the vendors that we work with actually will get all your rebates for you too. So you don't have to pay out of pocket and wait for the rebates. So we kind of make it a one-stop shop to get solar in. And we've also probably, I don't know, 3 or 4 years ago, changed our permitting system to make it just like Pasadena has, an over-the-counter permit. So it's very easy to do solar. And we've got somewhere between 8 and 10 megawatts of solar in Santa Monica now, which is a huge amount. It's really just by constantly beating this drum and providing information and having one place where people can go to find out the information, it's really helped to greatly expand the amount of solar on rooftops in Santa Monica.
I really like that idea of trying to get a third party in to do a lot of the work. Our biggest challenge initially, when I started with the city about 9 years ago, was related to the fact that we actually produce our own electricity, and so there was really no. When folks go solar, they're going off of our grid, and there wasn't a lot of good communication between departments, nor was there any real desire to motivate folks to do this on the city end. And I think that very quickly, and again, this was 9 years ago, as the different departments were getting together, I think the biggest hurdle that we had was getting all of the departments together and understanding that this is how we can do it, this is the benefit, and here's where we can really all see a benefit if we work together. That one-stop shop that we have as well, Santa Monica's permit center, very much like Pasadena is with respect to the one-stop shop aspect, where we have fire within the building, public works, planning and building. And so I think that the advertisements, the education and outreach that Water and Power had done, I think really helped out, because in the last 3 years, we've probably seen a 60% increase year over year. The rebates, I've heard the process is not that hard. I've not gone through it in the city of Pasadena. And I think that probably the change that we can make to make it better is understanding that third party, how they're involved and how because it's got to be profitable for them, right? They're not going to do it if can't make a buck. And so we probably want to understand that. We've seen it be pretty easy. Again, the over-the-counter experience has been quite easy, and the plans are standard plans. So I think that the actual sort of city side is not that difficult. Financing, we've heard sometimes it's not fun, but yeah, I'll connect with Dean afterwards to understand the third party use a little bit more, and what that relationship looks like with the city.
Mhm.
So what can we do on the actual cost to the resident though? I'm thinking about, we got solar panels on our roof and we just made a decision to do it because over 7 years, it'll be amortized, but not everybody wants to plunk down, that much money,
Right.
or can.
Yeah.
Are there ways to motivate residents to do solar or to make it easier for them?
Yeah, I don't think that the difficulty is necessarily the hurdle in terms of the actual process. It's actually one of the simplest permits that we have.
I mean, the
It's
money. I'm not talking about difficulty. I'm talking about how do people afford it?
right, and obviously there are the
Low income
rebates,
people, for example.
and then folks have to think about the amortizing, and there are companies out there that will allow you to pay over time, and even to some companies will lease them. I'm not sure that's a winner, but I think that on the city side, yeah, I think that what we can do is just educate and make sure that it's easy to do. I don't think that the city is probably going to pay money to residents themselves, but certainly through the rebate process and helping them understand the great savings that can be achieved within. I guess you said it was 7 years. I don't know if that's for a
For our
commercial
house,
building.
yeah.
Your house, your home. Yeah, that's kind of what I've heard for most homes of sort of average use, 7 to 10 years they pay off. But yeah, there is that initial out cost, that outpouring of money that is required.
Right, but there are the cost of solar panels has dropped dramatically over the last like 7 or 8 years. So it is relatively affordable now, but it still can be a big chunk of money. There are financing programs that all throughout California you can take advantage of, where you can have with no upfront cost, put solar on your roof, and you pay it back over a certain number of years on your property tax bill. So if you're going to stay in your house for a certain amount of time, it makes sense you can do it that way, where you don't have to put out, $25,000 or $40,000 on a solar thing. You can finance it and pay it back on your property tax, and the value of your property is going up, and it's a 25-year life cycle of the solar system.
Good. So I'm hearing some good exchange of ideas and brainstorming about this challenge. I see another good question here, and then I think I'm going to start winding this up. I want to say that we are taking the questions that have been posed and we did not get a chance to actually address them here. And our guest panelists have kindly agreed that they will later take these questions. We can send them by email. Here's a question for David Reyes. Do you see Pasadena moving its city vehicles to electric? Earlier this week, the city council approved entering into a 3-year contract to run city vehicles on renewable natural gas. I don't know what renewable natural gas is. I think natural gas is methane, isn't it?
Right. Renewable natural gas is natural gas that's produced from typically landfills. So it's captured landfill gas that otherwise would be released into the atmosphere or burned. So it's not coming from a fossil fuel source.
But it's going to go into the air, right? I mean, it's
well, when you burn it, has significantly lower greenhouse gas emissions than if you released it into the air.
okay.
Yeah, so within my department, and I'm probably a mid-sized department, we've got about 85 employees. We have code enforcement, building inspection services, and then obviously planning staff and others. But we've got about 19 vehicles. All of them are electric. We worked with the city council in the last, I guess it was 1.5 years ago, to make that happen. And I think that the city has made a commitment towards any new leases or purchases to at least looking at and exploring electric first. I think the interesting challenge is for a full service city like Pasadena, and I think that the challenge is probably about solved. The conversation was with PD. And obviously there's fire. I'll get to that in a second. But with the police department, there was always a concern that, well, what if for some reason, we have no battery and now we're in a life-threatening situation and something happens. And I think that as the batteries have evolved, I think as the life of the cars and the batteries have evolved and the durability of these electric vehicles has been proven, I think that you're going to start seeing more police departments try to go electric as well. We're not there just yet. I know that some vehicles within the police department are electric, but not the entire fleet. But I will say that our city council has made a tremendous commitment to to electric vehicles. And that's, I think, probably the way of the future for most cities, and trying to buy in bulk, getting them all at once and not one-offs. I think it's actually quite cheap to do it that way. So we're excited and proud, and we're happy with the cars that we have. So.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
One last question. Since this is about climate action plans, what do you both think about whether the climate action plan as a vehicle for specific actions is really useful? Should cities try to fit their policy decisions into climate action plans, or should they just go ahead and take specific actions that reduce greenhouse gas emissions?
I'll start on that. I think a climate action plan done right is kind of essential. You can start doing a whole bunch of different actions, but if you're not tracking your progress and making sure and adjusting, you're not going to get to your reduction goal at all. Having a climate action plan that sets a very specific target and requiring, in Santa Monica, we're not doing every 5 years an inventory, we're doing it every other year, because we want to make sure that we're on track to meet our goals. So every other year we do an inventory, and we do a report back to council and to the community on where we're at in our timeline. The way that we've written the plan in Santa Monica, anybody can pick it up and look at it and say, you committed to doing all of these things. Where are you? Why haven't you done this? What's changed? So I mean, a plan is, the purpose of a plan is to get you to an end goal. And I think if you just start doing something without a plan, and just start taking specific actions, you can, maybe do something really well with certain specific actions, but in the long run, you find you've only cut your emissions 3% instead of 30%. So I think they're very useful. You can write a plan that's really bad and has a lot of aspirations, but doesn't require anything, and it sits on a shelf too. So it's not just the plan, but it's the plan and the people who use the plan. And you got to come back to it, and you got to keep touching base and making adjustments and making sure that you're on the right track.
Yeah, I would just add that I think that for maybe some smaller cities or some cities that are that haven't really considered this yet, and at least I would hope that every city has at least thought about it. Having some stated goals is important. And maybe taking a small, dipping your toe into the water, if you will. But I agree with Dean that if you don't have that plan, it really makes it challenging to piecemeal and one-off a sort of green policy discussion and decision. The other issue is, as elected officials change, some of those initial policies, they may change over time too. And without having that plan that gets adopted as a city, that has all of the goals and policies within it, it makes it challenging. But I think that the other thing that Dean said, I think is so important, is that it needs to be that living, breathing document that's able to change. And I like the idea of the every other year. I looked at some of the Santa Monica numbers again in 2018 when we adopted ours. The 5 years seemed to make sense just in terms of being able to track. but I think there's so much change so quickly. Probably 5 years doesn't make sense. I don't know if every other year is the right number or something else, but I think to the point of whether or not a plan should be made, I think that every city should endeavor to take on the plan and take that up with the community, because I found that every community really cares about this. And so I think that it would behoove the city and the elected officials in that city to take up a plan.
Cynthia, can I say one more thing about a plan? One thing that we did in Santa Monica when we were developing our most recent climate action plan was we really involved the community, and we had a number of large community events and small community events. We brought in various stakeholders and folks from schools and from the college and business people and got their perspectives. And we're recognizing that it's not just the city government that's going to, meet this goal. It really requires everybody to take action. So one of the concerns I heard raised was, how do we get the community involved? How do we get people to put solar on their roof and this and that? So we've tried to use the making of the plan as a way to engage people. And now that we've engaged them, we have a group called Climate Action Santa Monica that formed on their own, that is an advocacy group of residents that's connected in the community, and they help do outreach now for this stuff. So the planning process, or the process of creating a climate action plan, can actually help to catalyze action in the community if it's done properly.
Thank you so much, both of you. This was an excellent exchange. I only regret that we were unable to get to all of these 41 questions. A lot of them were really good. People asked questions about waste. They asked questions about environmental justice and how to include a wider scope of people. A lot of good questions on a wide range of subjects, but we will try to respond or convey them to you. If people would like, they can also send us emails with any further questions, topics that didn't get raised. So in closing, Dean and David, thank you so much for your willingness to spend this evening with us. It was very informative and truly expert.
Thank you, Cynthia.
I'll hand it over to Martha now.
Happy to do it.
Everyone.
Yes, thank you. I hope you can all hear me. Thank you, David and Dean, for this real enlightening discourse on climate action. We know that focusing on results and not politics is the only way to combat the looming crisis. I really want to thank Mayor Gordo for, understanding this and making David available and making this possible for us to become more of a community of action. And, Cynthia, thank you so much for moderating today's event. You did a great job. Dear audience, if we didn't get to your question, please feel free to send any lingering questions you have via email, and we'll work to get you an answer in a little while. I'm going to show you a screen where you can see the email that you'll be sending that to. Basically, it's our events committee who will be putting together those questions and working to get some answers for you. Also, we want to remind you that this video is going to be available on the LWVPA, the League of Women Voters Pasadena-area YouTube channel tomorrow or Saturday. And so we want you to let your friends and your family know so that they can get excited about climate action. Outside our borders, things are worse, causing massive migrations of people and causing a lot of conflict. And I think one of the things we need to do is try to prevent these things. It's not just about being uncomfortable as we live and things like that, but it really, really is about creating and keeping the whole world stable, really, so that we can live our best lives. The thing is that we know climate action can be really overwhelming. You just heard how broad the topic is. But my advice is that you focus on at least one aspect of the plan, like vehicle emissions or solar energy or bicycle lanes to get started. Just pick something. Only David and Dean have to address everything at once, but they need our help. We need to be the wind beneath their wings, because there are a lot of people who are scared of change and turning things over, and they think, that we will be bringing on the catastrophe ourselves instead of the climate doing it. So please focus your attention on actions that you can take to help put the action into planning and achieve net zero in a few short years. So we have a few events coming up that we want to invite you to, and I'm going to try to share my screen. I'm not the best at this, but let's see what I can do. And hopefully you'll be able to see it. And the first thing that we want to bring up is the fact that there locally, the city of Pasadena is actually inviting you, as David had mentioned. There's going to be a municipal services committee meeting on Tuesday, March 23rd at 3:30, and a city council meeting on Monday, April 12th at 4:30. And these are the topics. The topic will be covered. So if you want to get engaged and start listening to at least what the city of Pasadena is, and if you're not in the city of Pasadena, start paying attention to your climate action plan in your city. And there are things that you can do to help them move forward. Agitate for change, be a partner though, because I think that's what they need. They need to be able to make bold moves forward, and they need your backing. The next event that we have coming up is very near and dear to the league. It's about people-powered fair maps. As you know, redistricting is taking place at the completion of the census. We're going to get our population counts. And all over the US, every district line is going to be redrawn from congressional districts all the way to the local water and power districts that you may have. So we feel that it's really important. We want you to join us. So hopefully you'll come to our website and take a look at what you can do about making sure that maps are fairly drawn, and that representation of communities is not, diluted. The next thing that we have coming up in May is our Thursday with the League in the morning at 10 a.m. And this is about talking about trying to hold the LA County Sheriff's Department accountable. So please come listen to how the Citizens Oversight Committee is trying to meet the challenge of getting in there into some things that are, we've taken, we've assumed that we can't change anything, and we really need to start working together. Again, this is another thing that's very difficult to leave folks standing there by themselves trying to make change. And then again, we hope you enjoyed this program, and we look forward to, please look forward to the complete video on our website. Here we have shared the website with you. And here at the bottom is that email that you can send your questions about climate action and see if we can get some answers for you. So that's at events@lwvpa.org. And so now I will stop sharing. And the one thing I want to tell you is please come to our website and do register for our events. And we want to thank again our public officials for attending, and to David and Dean for sharing your knowledge and commitment to climate action, and to Cynthia for an excellent Q&A session, and finally to our Zoom hosts, Catherine and Kitty, and to you, our wonderful audience, for sharing this evening with us. Thank you for hanging in there with us, and we'll see you next time. Thank you.